Welcome everyone. Welcome to this Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting, which has been convened as a hybrid meeting. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed subsequently. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing it either from the Council Chamber, at Civic Offices here at Angel Street in Bridgend, or from remote locations. Some of you may already be aware that I have a condition called adult onset epilepsy, which occasionally results in me experiencing short absences or mild seizures. On the rare occasions that this may happen in a meeting, you should not be alarmed, and should I as chair experience one of these absences or have any other technical ICT difficulties during the meeting, it has been agreed that Councillor Freya Bledsoe, the chair of Scrutiny Committee 2, will step in temporarily as chair, and in her absence, then Councillor Pennell Thomas, as leader of my group, the Democratic Alliance, will step in during the meeting. Please can everyone ensure that mobile phones are switched off or switched to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda, and I will ask officers to present a summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Officers and members are reminded to refer to the page numbers contained in the public version of the agenda report pack. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point. But I would ask that, with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all other times you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help to minimize any background noise and interference. Whether attending in the chamber or remotely, if any members and officers wish to raise a point or question, they should click the raise hand icon at the top right-hand side of the Microsoft Teams window, and I will come to you in the order I receive requests. If you are in the chamber, please switch on the microphone on your desk and speak directly into the mic to allow those who are remote to hear you clearly. Please lower your hand once you have finished speaking. The instant messaging chat button has been disabled for this meeting, and please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Officers from Scrutiny will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout its duration, and where necessary will mute those not being used. I will ask officers to introduce themselves when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. They too should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use. I will now proceed to the agenda. And item 1 are apologies for absence. Jess, could you announce the apologies for absence received?
Thank you, Chair. I have received apologies for absence from the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Social Services and Early Help, Councillor Jane Gebby, and Councillor Neil Farr, Cabinet Member for Regeneration.
Thank you, Jess. Are there any other apologies for absence? No, so I'll now move. Oh, Councillor John Paul Blundell, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to say, I have a visit of a school this afternoon, so I need to be gone by 1:30. So hopefully we'll be gone by 1:30.
So, well, 1:30 maybe tomorrow morning, judging by the agenda. But okay, Councillor Paul Davis, please.
Thank you, Chair. I believe the meeting about 12:30, Chair. For work, I can't go after that. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davis. Councillor Graham Walton.
Likewise, Chair, I'm due at the same school visit as Councillor Blundell, so we'll probably need to leave about 1:30. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walter. Councillor Heidi Bennett, please.
Thank you, Chair. Similar, I need to leave at 1, I'm afraid, for work. Thank you.
Okay, I very much hope the meeting will be finished by then. Thank you very much, Councillor Bennett. Any other apologies for absence? Okay, I'll now move to item 2 on the agenda, and that's declarations of interest. If any member has an interest to declare in any matter on the agenda, then please click the raise hand icon, and I will come to you in turn. Don't believe there are any declarations of interest at this stage, but if you do feel that you need to declare an interest at any point during the meeting, please do raise your hand. Move to item 3 on the agenda, and that's the approval of the minutes. Please can I have a mover and a seconder?
Move.
Second.
Could I ask who that was, just for the
Councillor Pennant-Thomas.
Thank you, Councillor Pennant-Thomas. And the seconder was?
Councillor Bennett.
Councillor Bennett. Thank you very much indeed. Now go to item 4, and that is the Q2 performance report. I will ask the Chief Executive to initially present the report, and each corporate director will be invited to introduce their directorate dashboards as listed in the agenda. Members will have had the opportunity of considering the papers and performance dashboards contained within them. So I would ask that Corporate Management Board please be very brief in the introduction of their directorates to allow maximum time for members' questions. I will then call upon members who indicate they wish to speak by clicking on the raise hand icon. I would also like to highlight that if members wish to ask questions on the corporate risk register, then this is done when considering the respective performance dashboards to which your question is in relation to. Okay, I'll hand over now to Mark Shepherd, who is our Chief Executive.
Good morning, Chair, and thank you. As you've directed, I'm going to keep this very brief to allow the maximum time for questions. Just briefly, in terms of the overall performance at Q2, I think it's probably just helpful if I explain that the overall position for performance against the corporate plan commitments is more or less the same as they were at Q2 last year. The summary tables show that. Similarly, for the corporate plan PIs, we're in a very similar position. So this year there are 3 amber, 7 red at Q2. Last year there were 3 amber and 8 red. So broadly, performance is pretty much the same as last year. Obviously, we're going to get into the detail as we go through the directorates. I think probably what you will find is there are some recurring themes, most obviously around things like workforce and difficulties in recruiting and retaining staff in some areas. Obviously also around uncertainty around budgets, in-year inflation and increased costs across the board. And some significant issues in pressures across services, most obviously in social care, but also in homelessness and a variety of others. So I think you'll see a pattern. I hope also, as you mentioned it, that you'll see an alignment with the corporate risk register, where we've identified those issues as very obvious corporate risks, which not only need to be identified, but need to be mitigated. And I think without further ado, Chair, rather than get into the detail, I will leave it at that as my introduction, and I will leave it to you whether you want me to go straight to the Chief Executive's directorate or not.
Thank you very much indeed, Mark. Would anyone like to make any general comments on the corporate-wide performance management? Councillor Heidi Bennett, please.
Thank you, Chair. I note the comments on 4.7, page 23, regarding some KPIs not having a RAG status or data or quarter targets. And I understand that benchmarking may be underway with some of these KPIs, and system limitations are affecting pull-off of data on some others. But throughout the document, key performance data is missing. And as examples, we've got safeguarding e-learning and disabilities facilities grants as just 2. We are approaching end of Q3 now. So my question is, will we have performance data recorded for our next review? Or if not, when can we expect to see it? I've also got a second question in relation to it overall as well. Shall I take that now or come back to that?
Yes, you can take it now, Heidi. Thank you.
Okay. So my second question is that there also seems to be issues with tracking data throughout the document. The document tracks performance this year, as the Chief Executive just said, compared against the previous year's quarter achievement. So the trend data relates to that rather than the annual targets that are set. So that question really is about how our annual targets being tracked and reported. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. And this is linked with my comment yesterday, Mark, when Cabinet and Corporate Management Board considered this particular document, and that is the way in which the information is presented in the document, and to ensure that commitments and performance indicators are linked and that we have a list of next steps so that we can track the cause and effect of actions on improving performance indicators over the course of different quarters. I also think, with regards to Councillor Bennett's comments on benchmarking, we should have some kind of proxy measurements for those areas which have been affected by the pandemic, and also ensure that we do have some kind of comparative analysis against other local authorities, so we can strive to be the best in Wales at everything we do, and not seek to be average or the lowest common denominator. So, Mark, perhaps you can pick up some of those corporate-wide comments which Councillor Bennett and I have raised.
Yes, certainly, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Bennett. I mean, apologies to those that were in the meeting yesterday, because I'm never going to repeat some of the stuff I said at the corporate performance assessment yesterday. But I think broadly I agree with you on both of those points. To make these sessions as meaningful as possible, then clearly we need to provide as much accurate data as possible. I think there's a challenge, and rather get into specifics, but there is a challenge that some of the PIs identified. Of course, we don't get the opportunity to provide quarterly updates. I mean, I think certainly Lindsay would explain within education, for example, often they are annual, and therefore we constantly have a reporting each quarter that says, well, we won't get those figures until the end of the year. That said, I think there are some anomalies that have been identified where I would like to think that even if we can't get, as you say, precise information, we could get a proxy measure or some narrative comment even that would give you an indication about whether we feel we're on target. And I suppose that leads to my last point, really, is that I said yesterday, I'm certainly not writing off this year, so please don't take that this way. But clearly we have an opportunity, don't we, that we've got a new corporate plan coming. We're likely to have new wellbeing objectives. And within that, we can also then frame the corporate plan, the objectives, the performance indicators, and indeed the way we measure and monitor those in a different way. So I know that's something that Alex and Kate are looking at. And I think we can, therefore, with your help, actually, seek to improve greatly the presentation of this information moving forward, and hopefully, therefore, address the issues that have been identified. And I know that doesn't wholly address it for this year. To a certain extent, we are where we are for some of the measures this year. But I think there's a recognition that if this is to be meaningful, then we do need to take on board those comments. So I hope that's acceptable to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Councillor Bennett, do you have anything else to add, or are you content with the response?
I'm happy with the response. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Just a couple of general points from me then on the corporate-wide risks and issues which you mentioned, which flow right across the organisation, Mark, and that is workforce. Recruitment, retention and vacancies is a corporate risk at all in all directorates from a study of the different dashboards. But a cursory glance at the number of vacancies which are shown on our website shows that only 62 vacancies are listed. So could I ask where our vacancies are advertised? Are they on specialist websites dependent on the profession? Which services are experiencing significant performance issues as a result of recruitment and retention? And then the second point I'd like to raise is the budget settlement. I believe we had a budget settlement yesterday from the Welsh Government, or an indicative budget settlement. Could I ask either you or perhaps Caris would like to come in on this? What is the latest with the final budget settlement and indicators from the Welsh Government? And will we be in a position to see a revised set of budget proposals and the full financial ledger at the next meeting of the Budget Research and Evaluation Panel, which is scheduled for January? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Perhaps if I come in initially, and if Caris wants to come in, or indeed Kelly wants to come in on the HR issue, they can do so. In terms of where we advertise posts, my understanding, though perhaps Kelly can confirm this, is that all advertisements should, as a default, be on our website. However, we will obviously then also advertise some posts in specialist journals or magazines, or target them as appropriate. It wouldn't be sufficient to simply just put them on our website. In some cases, we have to be proactive about where those things go. I think one of the challenges, I think you mentioned there were only 62 advertisements on the website. One of the challenges, I think, is trying to rethink how we do recruit. I know there's a feeling within the organisation that the definition of madness is doing the same thing over and over again. So I know, managers will say, well, I've put this out 6 times now at this rate, and it's not doing anything. So I think there's quite a lot of work going on in the background about how we can potentially, for example, make the authority the organisation of choice for people. And that might be more, not just about salary and job, but it might be about the place. It might be about pushing more the attractiveness of the area. its accessibility, etc., and all the kind of things that you might do to sell a place. So I think the whole workforce strategy and the way we're approaching that is having a bit of a reboot. I'm sure individual directors could talk to you at great length about what they're doing. I know Claire would be able to in social care about a whole range of initiatives that are going on there. But I will double check the initial point, because I don't want to mislead you in any way. But my understanding is that as a default, all advertisements should be on the council website, but then they would then appear elsewhere. But you'll also understand that, to put them in other journals, be that the Municipal Journal, be that the Guardian or whatever, is also very expensive. So it's a delicate balance as always here, and you need to ensure that that is worthwhile. On the budget, you will understand that we only got our direct settlement figure yesterday of 7.7%. So we're now working through that. I will just make a few points, because I think the challenge sometimes is that the headline figure can seem quite attractive, or certainly attractive compared to what perhaps we thought we were going to get. But you need to be a little bit careful not seduced by that. We need to bear in mind the underlying level of inflation is still, 10.7%, I think it was yesterday. And the other big thing is just checking that all of the normal grants that the authority gets still exist. So I think we get about £80 million worth of grants each year. Well, 7.7% wouldn't be so attractive. A lot of those grants have been taken out and are part of your settlement. So there's a little bit of work to run through, but there's a cautious welcome to that settlement. It might allow us to relook at some of the things we looked at with BREP last time. Most obviously, things like council tax, but there will be a range of things that people would probably want to revisit, be that the proposal for schools or some of the cuts, or indeed some of the growth actually that we weren't able to fund. So it's a long-winded way of saying I think that by January we'll be in a much better place to present to BREP what our thinking is, and what we've been able to revise and review on the back of that settlement being marginally better than we anticipated. But on both of those issues, Chair, I don't know whether there are hands up, but if either Kelly or Caris want to come in on those things, I'm sure they can add to those.
Thank you for that helpful reply, Mark. Kelly, please.
Just to confirm Mark's point, all adverts are on our own website, and then, as he said, if there are specialist journals or websites, we can put them on them. So, for example, I'm advertising at the moment for a group manager for HR. We've sent that to the local HR network, which covers the whole of Wales, to ensure that's circulated, and we have had some response from that. In terms of the numbers of vacancies, I think if you look through them in detail, what you'll see is that some of the ones on there are for multiple vacancies. So there is one on there at the moment for school catering staff. I think Lindsay can confirm. I think that they're probably in excess of 90 vacancies. So there's only one advert on the website, but it's going to cover, well, we're not going to cover 90 posts, but, if we were successful, and that applies for a few of them that are on there as well.
That's useful. Thank you very much for confirming that, Kelly. I'm going to bring in the leader now, if I may. He's indicated that he'd like to speak, and then perhaps, Claire's put her hand down now, but the leader, I'll bring in the leader. Hugh David, please.
Thanks, Chair. The Chief Officer for Legal and HR has just made the point that there's a large number of vacancies on our website that are vacancies for multiple roles, but the roles are across a number of sites, or care workers, for example, where we would happily recruit a large number of care workers if they would actually apply, but we will have one standard advert for care workers, for example. And also on the website, it is divided into school vacancies, social care vacancies, and then general vacancies. So they are all, or should all be listed as the Chief Officer has confirmed on the website. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Leader. I'll bring in Councillor Paul Davis now, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't know if the officers received this, the slides we had late last night. On slide 4, it just says it's a one line that says work with landlords on empty properties. It's on the slides there. I'm in the Chief Exec's Directorate. Yeah, we're in the right directorate, Chair, which is a common mistake I've made in the past. The quick question I'm asking is, I don't want to say too much, but I've got quite a large property trying to be developed in my ward currently. Now, it's at a brick wall with planning. Is there any sort of crossover between, because we've got a policy in the council of bringing empty properties back into use, obviously. That's a council-wide policy we have. It's a brick wall with planning. I don't know where we go from there. Do you know what? Is there any crossover we can sort of, you can't put pressure on planning, I understand that. But what happens then, you know, it's a big, large property, someone wants to develop it, there's a slight hiccup with planning, and that's the end of the matter. It just sits there empty now, which is against our policy, I think.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Davis. I think, does the leader want to come in, or is that a legacy hand, leader?
I can come in. I'm sure
you can come in, but I know Janine has also indicated that she'd like to come in on this. So, would you like to contribute first, leader? Or?
Yeah, if Janine is going to come in on empty homes, I wanted to reassure Councillor Davis that it certainly doesn't sit just with planning. We work across the council, so there's a working group on empty homes. Obviously, it requires a cross-department response with colleagues in shared regulatory service, with colleagues in legal. And of course, we will offer financial assistance. We do and have successfully offered loans and grants to a number of owners across the county borough and successfully brought empty homes back in to use. So certainly, whilst we will use the planning powers that we have, it is one of the powers that we use, and actually we would try and work with owners in the first instance to avoid having to use our statutory powers. But in addition to planning powers, we also have statutory powers that I'm sure the Chief Legal Officer and the Corporate Director of Communities can refer to, and we will indeed, as a last resort, pursue those powers if we need to, particularly if, for example, the property becomes unsafe. We will not hesitate to take court action, for example, and there are several examples across the county borough where we have and will continue to take tough action against the owners of empty properties. And of course, we will be bringing forward to council, once the consultation has concluded, a proposal around increasing the premium on council tax on empty homes that have been empty for a long period as well. So I'm sure our officer colleagues and Councillor Good, who's leading on this work, can add more detail if required, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leader. Janine Nightingale, the Corporate Director for Communities, has indicated she'd like to come in now, so I'll bring in Janine now. Thank you.
Oh, many thanks, Chair. Just for the recording, I'm Janine Nightingale, the Corporate Director for Communities. If I may, I think the leader has made most of the points there very concisely. I think the point about the planning that the Councillor Davis has referred to, the important part about the planning authority, it is part of BCBC, but the local planning authority should be acting on its own auspices and should make decisions that are not connected to the activities of the council, in order that it makes the right decision for the planners. So what I would offer, though, to Councillor Davis is that my planners meet to see whether we can resolve some of the issues with the building that he's talking about in his ward, to see whether we can move it on. What we can't do, though, as the local planning authority, is to grant planning permission for something that's not appropriate. We have to have consistency with decision making. It has to be part of planning law. But I think what we can do in this instance, if I may offer some assistance, let's sit down, let's see what we can do, because sometimes having those discussions, you can move things on and overcome hurdles that you wouldn't otherwise. So I'm pretty willing to do that, Chair, if that would help.
Thank you very much, Janine. Councillor Paul Davis, you content with that?
Yeah, I'm content with that, Chair. Can move on. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So I'll bring in now Councillor Ross Pennell-Thomas, please.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Can I first compliment members in the chamber on their festive wear? I've obviously missed the memo, but I'm putting my state to shame without my festive Christmas jumper on. If we have a council meeting before next week, I will certainly dust them off from the cupboard. Chair, just an observation, an overarching observation around the report today, and that's around sickness absence. So minus the communities directorate, which obviously involves a lot of manual handling, you can see the breakdown of sickness absence there. There seems to be a persistent and stubborn problem, and I've sat in enough of these meetings over the years, with stress and anxiety, which is not work-related. Clearly, if it is work-related, the authority as an employer is able to step in, offer support. So I'm wondering what it is, if there is any particular type of problem, although it's difficult to work out if it's not work-related, but what are we doing to try and bring that persistent, stubborn problem down? Because I know this has been a recurring theme for a number of years throughout these reports. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Pennell-Thomas, and I obviously didn't get the memo on the Christmas wear either, so I'll bring in now the Chief Executive, Mark Shepherd.
Oh, I thought you had, Chair. I think I'll ask Kelly to come in after me, but I think Councillor Pennell-Thomas raises a very valid point there, because I think, again, you may want to go in this directorate by directorate, but we might as well deal with it now, that I think you'll see a creeping trend across each directorate, where I think sickness levels lowered quite considerably during the pandemic, where people were all at home, or in the main were at home. And I think perhaps we thought, well, this is a way of cracking sickness. But clearly, as people have come back into the office and have come back into a more normal work pattern, what we found is that those levels of sickness have increased. I think, as you indicated, I think the reasons for that are going to be relatively complicated and multivariate. And I'm not entirely sure you could, in many cases, wholly separate workplace stress from home stress. I think people are either just stressed or anxious, and it would be difficult to entirely define that. We recognise, though, that there's a number of factors that perhaps we can control. So consistent feedback we get is that we have a fatigued workforce, in many cases because they've been working flat out since certainly the pandemic. We have a depleted workforce because one of the challenges with vacancies, of course, is that people who remain in work are often taking on the burden of additional work because maybe a team of 6 only has 4 in it, or that kind of example. So we know that those are issues. But more generally, directly responding to Councillor Pennell-Thomas, there is an enormous amount of work going on about how we support the well-being of staff. So I'm sure that's probably what Kelly wants to come in and specifically talk about. But I wanted to reassure you that the investment of that in terms of an officer, but also in terms of a whole range of programmes, advice, support, help, is far, far greater than I've ever known. I do genuinely think it's an investment. I think it's an investment that is worthwhile, because I think if we didn't have that, things would be a lot worse. And just to reassure you, that is as much about keeping people in work as it is about getting people to return to work. In fact, I'd put the emphasis on the former. What we find is that once someone has gone off on stress or anxiety, it is much, much more difficult to get them back than if we can support them while they're in work and perhaps make allowances and be much more flexible. Then that is usually the way that we go about it. But I'm sure that's probably what Kelly wants to come in on, if that's okay, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mark. I'll bring in Kelly now for any supplementary comments.
Thank you, Chair. I think Mark has covered quite a significant amount of what I was going to say. I just wanted to emphasise the wellbeing packages we have got in place for staff. So at the moment, we've got access to Care First, which is our contracted wellbeing support. So any member of staff or members can contact Care First for confidential discussions with them. In addition, if an employee raises the issue with a manager, because Care First, they don't have to go through their manager, but if they raise it with a manager, we do also have some bespoke counselling services available. Again, on a consultancy basis, they've been extensively used, particularly by social services and wellbeing in the last 12 months, given that in light of certain circumstances there. We also have a wellbeing officer. She's employed on an EMR, and I put in a growth bid to see if we can extend that position, because the feedback we are getting from people who've used her is that it's very valuable and is promoting their well-being. Number of workshops being run. We're going to continue to develop them in the new year. Also, we've introduced the hybrid working. We feel, and the feedback we're getting is that's beneficial for people's well-being, because if they are having in their personal life some issues, they can then decide whether it's better for them to come in the office and get away from whatever's happening at home, or equally they can stay at home and deal with what's going on there but still be part of the working environment. So there are a number of factors. We're always open to suggestions on other things we can try, and would be interested actually in your members' feedback on other options we can look at.
Thank you, Kelly. Councillor Pennell-Thomas, are you content with the responses you've received?
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks very much. Councillor Paul Davis, is that a hand which you haven't taken down? I hate the phrase legacy hand, so try not to use it. Okay, thank you, everyone. Does anyone else have any comments now on the Chief Executive's dashboard, Chief Executive's Directorate? Councillor Amanda Williams, please.
Thanks very much. Apologies. Let me just go to the page. Can you hear me okay? Because I haven't got much of a voice.
Yeah, we've got you.
Yeah. I didn't know. Did you want me to come in first, or did you want Paul Davis to come in, Councillor Paul Davis? Because he was going to start off, I think. And I was going to join in, or was it? Oh, no, sorry, that was a different area. Yeah, that's fine. This wasn't on this. It was on DFGs.
This is on Disability Facilities.
Yeah,
Grant.
that was it. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, come in now, please, Amanda.
Yeah, I was concerned that we haven't got data for DFGs on there for a start. And I am BCBC's representative on Bridgend Care and Repairs Board. And I was in a board meeting yesterday. And I know that they had 71 outstanding DFGs that they were waiting approval on for some minor works that would allow residents to stay in their own homes or even be released from hospital. So given the fact that we've got no data on here, that obviously adds to the alarm bells for me as to where we are with DFGs. And I'd like an update, if possible, please, on that. I have got some more questions on DFGs, but I believe it's coming to a committee meeting in March. So I will keep those for the end when we look at the forward work programme. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Williams. We do have it on our forward work programme for discussion in March, so no doubt we'll be able to delve into this area in far more detail when we consider it. Just as a rider to that, you mentioned that we're awaiting data on disability facilities grants from Q2. We're now approaching the end of Q3, so I would ask whether the technical issues with regards to this have been resolved, and we're also awaiting data on safeguarding and e-learning. So be interesting to hear why that data hasn't been included in this particular pack. But I'm conscious of the fact that Martin Morgans would like to address your point on DFGs. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. For the purpose of the recording, my name is Martin Morgans, Head of Partnerships. Take my hand down. In terms of the actual physical data, apologies to begin with that we weren't able to display that, and with reference to your question about being available for the next quarter, yes, it certainly will most be available. The reason for not having the data for this specific CPA report is on the basis that we actually transition into a new system. So our data is across multiple sources at the moment. We've procured a new system as part of improving the DFG process. So that is currently with a supplier where we're actually interjecting that data and going through a cleansing and normalization process, which allow us better reporting and management of our DFG process end to end. So hence, apologies that we won't be able to supply that data for this particular quarter. I would like to reflect back to the year 21-22 figures that are accurate, and it demonstrates a downward gradient in terms of the DFG delivery, which is not what I want it to be. But we're working through these processes. We currently embarking on rolling out a framework which is going to reduce our bureaucracy in terms of the procurement process. So that framework is currently being finalised with procurement and legal, and we're looking in the new year to go out, which will give us direct access to contractors and take this our relationship in terms of going forward. So apologies on the basis. I did mail Councillor Williams after the council yesterday when I heard the implications around the DFGs. I think we've got to be careful here in terms of what DFGs are and what minor works are. And I'd like to investigate that because we have a number of grants, the Enable grant and the Hospital Home grant, which is for small adaptations, which are not DFGs, not classed as DFGs. So there's a strict definition in terms of what DFGs are, although minor adaptations don't fit within our criteria. So my team is responsible for the more complex, larger, so ramps, single bathroom alterations in terms of to wet rooms, and also extensions. So I'd like to offer the opportunity to take away the information. I'll engage with Councillor Williams in terms of what was discussed at the care and repair meeting, and I'll come back with some feedback on that. So I'll happily investigate that, but I just wanted this a differential between DFGs and minor works. I don't know, there's been a confusion there.
Thank you very much, Martin. Councillor Williams?
Thanks very much. Yeah, they were DFGs, I believe. I've just emailed Martin, and I'll pick it up with him this morning what those works are. But they are bathroom works and things like that, but just smaller bathroom works that rather than a whole new bathroom, if you know what I mean. But they were DFGs. Yes, thanks.
Okay, yes. Perhaps you can pick that up offline with Martin, Councillor Williams. I'm conscious we're already over time. Blame the chair. But just on DFGs, Martin, or perhaps Mark, can you provide some information on why our target on DFGs is so much higher than performance at the 21-22 year end, especially for children and young people? I'm referring to the indicators linked to achieving WBO2 and other indicators linked to achieving this objective.
There's an error in that. The actual target date for us should be 250 days. We had an aspirational target when we brought the service in-house, so we're going to, in the first year, hit 250 days in terms of our DFGs, albeit, you know, there's a complexity around the children's. They're far more complex in terms of the delivery. And then the second year, which we actually wanted to target 210 days in terms of aspirational. You know, but we've seen some unforeseens. We've gone through COVID. We've had some difficulty in terms of access to contractors around because of the explosion of private development. But the development of the framework and other factors is going to aid us in terms of our ability to deliver our DFGs in times. And if we reflect back where we are reducing the numbers. A number of the children's ones are legacy jobs, which actually third-party providers have handed back to us. So we've taken on where the clock is ticking on these. So we're actually working through that now, albeit the recognition that we're struggling in terms of recruitment, albeit as other sectors across the organisation. But to mitigate this, I've engaged using a framework, private sector sort of services and to support us from that. So we're currently running a pilot in terms of some of the complex DFGs where we've been supported by the private sector via a framework which we procured. So I'm hoping that's going to inject some pace into that. But we're really focused in terms of delivering better timelines across all DFGs, adults as well as children. And we've set relationships as well as the hospital in terms of OTs to get in there early to understand what the requirements and needs are. So, you know, our aspirations was initially 250 days in year one, and we want to move it to 210. Obviously, it was picked up in GAC, and I think some of the committee members wanted to maintain those aspirations, albeit they're difficult considering some of the circumstances, but I'm hopefully going to work through it.
Thank you for that comprehensive response, Martin, and the clarification. Does anyone have anything else on the Chief Executive's Directorate? I can't see any hands. I have two remaining items which I'd like to raise, if I may. I'm now referring to the digital strategy and the regulatory tracker. I'm just wondering why a more detailed review of our digital strategy hasn't occurred, because this was a recommendation of June 2021. And I understand only a light touch review has taken place thus far. This recommendation is now 18 months old. So essentially, what did the light touch review find? And is it a lack of human resources which is preventing the more detailed review taking place? And then I have a further question on homelessness to conclude. But I'll ask someone to take that now. Caris, please.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. For the purposes of the recording, I'm Caris Lord. I'm the Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change. I'll take the question on digital strategy. We've done a light touch this year. There is a rationale behind that, which is that we are reviewing our working as we're going forward. Part of that is the hybrid working that we've obviously been looking at. But also we've had some work done with regard to what our digital aspirations should be, both as a borough, but also in the way in which we work. So we've had some work done on that. We're currently pulling that together so that we can look at that, first of all, Corporate Management Board, but then with Cabinet, around what our aspirations should be and what our direction of travel should be. So we've delayed the digital strategy because it would seem that we may well end up having to review that again once we've decided on our digital priorities. So that work is currently being pulled together and should be looked at early in the calendar year. And then we will use that to inform the digital strategy and the work that needs to fall out of that once we've agreed it.
Thank you very much, Caris. Just going to conclude with some remarks on homelessness. I'm now referring to WB02, and that's the commitment on helping people in communities to be healthier and more resilient. I'm aware that homelessness is on Councillor Paul Davis's Scrutiny Committee 3's forward work programme at the beginning of next year, so I don't want to dwell on it too much. But I just wanted to ask how it can be labelled as green on the tracker, when in other places you note that it is a significant corporate risk because of the shortage of suitable accommodation in the county borough. So how do you reconcile what appears to be an anomaly in those circumstances, or am I getting confused with the tracker? It's sometimes difficult to read for a layperson such as myself. Martin, sorry. I just nodded to you. I didn't say your name, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's an interesting sort of indicator in terms of being green. And I think the way I would look at that is, albeit you've seen significant pressures on my budget, from a temporary accommodation hitting, pre-COVID was 135,000. We around about 4.5 million at the moment in terms of the grants and additional budgets we've garnished. But we are preventing people becoming homeless from that perspective. I think the differential is between the statutory and non-statutory. So, from our perspective, when you reflect on PAM 012, which is part of the WBO, we should be diverting people away from being homeless from this perspective, but in a different way. But unfortunately, we've had to use our authoritative powers to support these people through temporary accommodation. So it's not following the statutory duty as this point in terms of DOPS 39, which is why that is low. But we are mitigating, hence the numbers we have in temporary accommodation, are we mitigating them becoming homeless, but through our intervention, which from that concept, we are delivering a safe place for these persons to be residing in, albeit the underlying pressure from that green is that we would like to do things differently, but we are where we are. So it is a bit of a conflict in terms of that. So albeit, and it's been recognised in our committees, we do have rough sleepers, and I think from that perspective, there's also a choice decision. It's not that we're not working with these people when they're out in the sort of community, but yeah, from that perspective, we are mitigating, but obviously it's a significant pressure and cost to us.
Thank you, Martin. You've predicted my supplementary question, so that's always good to hear. We'll now move on unless anyone has anything on the Chief Executive's Directorate. I'm conscious we're over time on this particular item. Okay, we'll now move to the Communities Directorate then, and I'll ask the Cabinet members who cover this area and Janine Nightingale, the Corporate Director for Communities, to make any brief remarks, and I stress brief, so that we can ensure that we have some succinct questions and answers to follow. Who would like to come in? Don't shout all at once, everyone. Okay. All right, I'll bring Janine in then as the Corporate Director.
Councillor Spanswick, would you like to start, or would you prefer me to start?
Right, Councillor Spanswick is deferred to Janine, so we'll bring in Janine Nightingale. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'll be as brief as I can because I'm sure there's lots of questions that the committee have. In terms of performance within Q2, I think the Directorate has performed fairly well and largely in line with the budgets that we have. We've got a projected underspend of 526,000 at the moment, and that is largely driven out because we have a large volume of vacancies, and we have started discussing this in the committee already. There will be a common theme throughout the council. I would assume. Well, I'm not assuming. I know actually, but we have currently 34 posts in communities in senior or professional services positions that are vacant, I'm afraid, and it is causing us to have a very challenging operational set of circumstances. For instance, some of the vacancies we have are in areas such as structural engineers, transport planners, quantity surveyors, highway engineers. We are working with HR to try and get recruitment into these posts, but as a result, we do know market conditions are far more advantageous than what we can offer as a council. And it's tough. It is a tough environment to try and recruit to these posts. So we're trying to look at alternative ways, what we can do to the roles. But this is now, it is starting to have an impact on performance of the directorate, without a doubt. And it wouldn't be right if I didn't say that today. The other thing, of course, coupled with my large volume of vacancies in those professional services posts, is we were a very lean service to begin with, Chair, because of the last 10 years of austerity cuts have hit and cut quite deep into communities, and I think that's widely recognised. And so one of the things that I think we might have to do in communities going forward is to look at our target operating model. You know, we may, well, not may, I think we're at the point now where we may have to look at what services we will have to stop in order to use our resources more effectively to deliver frontline services. And that's something that I think we genuinely will have to consider going forward. The other thing I want to raise, that I must raise, is member referrals, Chair. That is something that is top of my priority list now. In that presentation that's in front of you for Q2, you will see significant achievements by my directorate, getting the LDP through to PEDU, to Welsh Government, getting 3.5 million for CCR for Awenny Road, 3.5 million for the sale of the Aldi site at Salt Lake, putting those levelling up fund bids in, shared prosperity fund. I could go on. However, all of those things will not mean anything if we can't get timely information to our members. So what I'm aware of is I now have to focus my priorities on getting those things right in the directorate. Now, and I want to say that, and I want to admit it today. So what we have done is we did a presentation earlier on in this term, back in, I think it was September, to all members. We are, believe it or not, starting to recruit and get additional help because the Communities Directorate doesn't have a business support unit. That was, I'm afraid, a cut for MTFS about 3 years ago. So we are getting staff in to help us with those referrals. We are trying to get more information onto the websites. And actually, from my point of view, things have marginally improved. I won't say there's been a big improvement. I know that some members have come back to me and said, thank you, I am getting some movement. It's not where I want it to be at all. And I'm hoping that in the new year, I can make a big difference. Martin, who's sitting next to me, has worked tirelessly. And actually, we've been a tag team on this, and I couldn't have done it without him. We need to make some improvements to the system. We all know that. But it wouldn't be right today if I didn't recognise that there are some performance issues with members' referrals. We do get 87% of referrals, into communities because we're front-facing. And in the last 6 months, we've had a year's worth of referrals. So we're definitely going to double the volume this year. The other thing I just want to very briefly talk about, Chair, before I stop, is we've got a couple of red PIs that for communities that I'd like to briefly discuss. The three are statutory compliance, waste for reuse, and our planning apps. Let me just give you a little bit of narrative on each one of those. The statutory compliance has massively improved since Q1. We're now at 87.7% compliance. But what I'd like to do, Chair, is to reassure committee that compliance and safety are two different things. All our buildings are safe, but compliance means we've got the certificates onto the system, and it's as an audit function. That's what compliance is. Safety is a very different thing. I'm just going to give you a very brief example. if we had a boiler in a school that wasn't working, we would go into that school, we would see what the problem was, and we'd call a gas engineer. We'd then take that boiler out of commission and put the backup boiler on. So that boiler would be removed. Now, that building isn't deemed compliant because the main boiler isn't working, but it does have a boiler and it is safe. When the gas engineer comes out, he fixes the boiler, but until that certificate is received from that gas engineer and loaded onto the system, I don't get compliance. So I don't think this objective will ever, this PI will ever be green. Green is 100% compliance. And the reason I'm saying that, there will always be times when we're chasing around the system to get the certification. But what I want to say is that those buildings are safe, but I would like to strive to get compliance up into the 90%. And the other thing we're doing is we are just about to procure an integrated works management system. And in short, what that is an IT system that's handheld, which means that gas engineer can load that certificate on at source. So when he's there fixing the boiler, we'll get that certificate straight away to get compliance, whereas now it's a very old-fashioned system where they have to send it in, we have to scan it, we have to upload it. So I'm hoping we can get a much better position. So just to say to committee, I'm very comfortable to say the estate is safe, but my compliance certificates are not where they need to be. The second one, Chair, is waste for reuse. Now, we have got fantastic performing waste for recycling. In fact, we're the second best local authority in Wales now for waste recycling. We're over 72%, which is phenomenal. And actually, all thanks to our community in Bridgend, because they're the ones who work tirelessly for that curbside recycling. However, we have gone under on our objective to reuse items for the reuse shop. And what that is to do with is our brand new Pile CRC site. We haven't got the reuse shop open. Now, unfortunately, we are still waiting a year later an application from Natural Resources Wales for an operator's licence. We've got an appealing currently with PEDU on that, and that's pending. And if that doesn't go in our favour, we'll then resubmit another application. So we're working tirelessly to get that site open. That site was ready over a year ago, and we still haven't got that licence. Now, what I would say though, Natural Resources Wales are one of our stakeholders and colleagues. They have similar issues that we have in terms of vacancies, and they have an awful lot of work as well. However, we need that licence for that facility. And then the last one, Chair, is planning applications. At the moment, this is a national indicator. We determine 60% of planning applications within 8 weeks. We should be better. However, we have a much depleted planning department. I have officers with caseloads of 90 applications, and they should be around the 50 margin. So I'm not getting as many applications determined as we should nationally. So we're now in the middle band. However, for me, it's about quality of decision making, not quantity. I'm not going to chase that statistic and have poor decisions made. We have very few appeals against this authority, and we're very successful in defending them. But I am currently doing a restructure, introducing more people into the team. We've got some very significant planning applications that have just landed. We've just determined the tennis centre. That was a very large application. We've got the new Bridgend College application in for Cheapside. We've got a new firing range for South Wales Police in for Pencode. And both of those bring very, very large planning fees, £190,000 for those two applications alone. And that will help us fund additional planners. So I think what you will see over the next year is that PI definitely turn amber, if not turn green. And then when we get our new LDP, hopefully, fingers crossed, through PEDU and through Council by the summer, you will see significant housing applications coming in as well, Chair. So just a little bit of narrative on the red. So I'll stop there for questions.
Thank you, Janine, for that comprehensive overview. I hope you haven't cited the firing range in Pencoed because of a certain councillor who represents the area. But I will now go to members who want to ask some succinct questions, I hope, and then followed by succinct answers on the Communities Directorate, and that is Councillor Amanda Williams, first of all.
Thank you very much. Two quick questions. The first one was on the referrals. I just wanted to make it clear that some of your departments are actually excellent at answering referrals. I know planning is very busy. I put a referral into planning, I have a response within a couple of days. So I think it is just some departments who are taking a long time, and I think those particular departments maybe need to be looked at. But the other one was on boilers in schools you mentioned and compliance. I just wondered if you could confirm whether if it's a temporary repair to a boiler, if that is classed as safe then, because I know this one of the schools I'm a governor in, we've had temporary repairs to the boilers, and we're wondering every day whether they're going to go down again. So I just wanted clarity on that, please. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Janine?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. What I would say, Councillor Williams, is safe, yes, reliable. I couldn't comment on that, because what we try to do is when a boiler goes down in a school is to get it up and operational as quickly as we can. So if we have to, very often we have to repair boilers and it takes a longer time because we're getting parts from overseas depending on what boiler was put in. And since in particular we've had issues with unfortunately the war in Ukraine and the availability of parts, it's taken much longer to get parts. So what engineers are doing is doing temporary measures. Now they are safe. They are definitely safe, as we wouldn't be putting that boiler back on. How reliable they are is another thing, of course, because it is a temporary measure. But what we would do is try to get the heating on as quickly as we could until we can do that permanent fix. So hopefully that'll reassure you they're safe. Again, a temporary measure it does as it says on the tin, really. It's just to try and keep that boiler going until we can fix it permanently when the new part arrives. And thank you for saying about the planners. They've got an awful lot on and they are very busy, but they are very good at returning referrals. But I would say as well, they get a much smaller number of referrals than some other departments. But they're a fantastic bunch of staff. Thank you for that, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Janine. Councillor Williams, you content?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rees-Good, Cabinet Member for Wellbeing, has indicated he'd like to contribute.
Chair, I just wanted to come in briefly on Councillor Williams' point on the referrals. As the Cabinet Member responsible for referrals for my sins, we are discussing as a team how perhaps we need to look at some cultural change and some learnings for both staff and members on how we make this system more efficient, because I think Councillor Williams does raise an important point that there are perhaps certain groups within teams that may need a bit of reassurance and help on how best to reply to members, but we are looking into that in the new year. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor Good, for that helpful intervention. Councillor Penhill-Thomas, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. Not to be outdone, this is a Christmas jumper that I found earlier. Janine's already preempted some of my questions around planning. I've been a member of the authority 12 years. I remember David Llewellyn as head of planning, and he had a huge number of planning officers at his fingertips. I've noticed, a significant change, a drastic change actually in the department. So I would share Councillor Amanda Williams's sentiments around the hard work there. Really pleased to hear what Janine is saying around extra resource, and I really hope that extra resource extends to enforcement as well, because I know that as far as I know, where we have one officer in enforcement, she's a trooper. She does her work very, very well, but there's only one of her, and we need more. Can I just touch very quickly on community asset transfer? I noticed that the target for 22-23 is 20. There's absolutely understand that we don't want to necessarily target things quarterly, but can I have an indication from officers, please, how many community asset transfers has gone through so far this year, possibly to Q2, but if you've got up-to-date relevant information to now as well, that would be really useful. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Beautiful jumper, especially as you're in the field. Janine, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to say as well, Councillor Penhill Thomas, we have 3 enforcement officers in the new structure. So you're absolutely right. We do need more people on the ground. So hopefully, if we recruit 2 additional officers, that'll make a massive difference for the team. With regard to the caps, we've got a very ambitious target this year to get 20 over the line. I know that Guy Smith and the team are working with an enormous amount of clubs out there to progress these agreements. I know currently we think we have about 10 to 12 that we think we can progress, hopefully by the end of this quarter. And well, not quarter 2, what I'm saying is quarter 3 in the new year. But what I will have to do, I'm afraid, is to go back to Guy to get the exact number of how many have been already signed off now, as opposed to how many will be at the end of quarter 3. I think by the end of quarter 3 will be 12, but I don't know how many of those are already signed off. But there's been a lot of interest, and particularly because we do offer some financial assistance as well to make some improvements to those facilities before they're catted. Yeah, the team have worked really hard on that. But if you don't mind, can I come back to you on those numbers? Because I will have to check with Guy where we are.
Thanks very much, Janine. Let's try and get that detail in writing then and put that down as one of our actions going forward. Councillor Penhill Thomas, would you like to come back on anything else apart from that?
No, that's fine. Thanks, Janine. Just wanted an indication of forward movement, and that's clear. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Paul Davis, please.
I noticed to come in, does he? Yeah, I'll give way to him just to come in.
Not on my screen, but... Oh, sorry, I missed...
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just briefly, Chair, follow up from Janine, that the CAT steering group meeting is scheduled for next Monday, so there'll be an up-to-date picture then of the whole CAT process, where we are with things, so that'll be useful after Monday.
That's useful. Thank you, Councillor Spanzik. Now, Councillor Paul Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of points, Chair. On page 48, Mark clarified yesterday, let me just get it back up. Mark clarified yesterday that the 3.5 million we queried in the pre-meeting previously was the Aldi money from Porthcawl, I believe, and that's now in the bank. So, but there's another outstanding figure of £275,000. It says by targeted for completion at the end of quarter 4. Could we have a explanation what that 275,000 relates to, please? I picked up the municipal waste issue, which Janine just mentioned, and Janine just mentioned to us, the director mentioned that Pyle is currently not hasn't opened yet because of contractual issues, but the Maesteg, there's a shop on Maesteg CAE site, which is the same type of what we're talking about. You're using the municipal waste, which hasn't been open for a number of years now, I believe. It was open for a while and closed. So that's another one I'd like to bring up. Anything else I add there? Yeah, so if you could answer them 2 points first, please, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Janine, please.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Davis. Actually, I'm not sure what that 275,000 is. It's probably a property relinquishment, something that is Justin Kingdon in Corporate Landlord is progressing. I do know about the 3.5 million, of course, because I was instrumental in working on that itself. But so, please, Councillor Davis, can I come back to you to clarify the 275? I will know it will be to do with the council building that we've disposed of, but I'll find out which one in particular that is. I would have thought it's because we're in the middle of the disposal process for that. That's why that hasn't dropped in. And then with regard to the reuse shops, these are normally run by charities. Now, unfortunately, the one in Maesteg, not unfortunately, was very, very successful. And there were some really marvellous items that we were selling to the community there that were donated for reuse. Now, the charity that was running that for us withdrew, unfortunately, and what we've been trying to do is trying to find someone to run that for us since. Now, what we're going to try and do is to put the Maesteg shop and the Pyle reuse shop together and offer both, and that's what the team are working on now. So we're hoping that we can get those joined up across the piece, across the county. But I do agree it's a real shame because it was a very, very successful reuse shop.
Thank you, Janine. Happy with that, Paul?
To say, Chair, it's the responses to the committee rather than just to me.
Yes, of course. Yeah, so we'll just record that that's an action, Jess, that Janine is going to get back to us on the £275,000 of capital receipts remaining. Okay, Councillor Heidi Bennett, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question is in relation to sickness absence. Sickness levels are high across the authority, with musculoskeletal issues rating quite highly. Now, I recognise Communities Department will no doubt involve a lot of roles requiring manual handling, and potentially home working and ergonomics may be impacting too. But what are we doing to reduce musculoskeletal issues across the department or indeed the authority, please?
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Janine?
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Bennett. It is a perennial problem, I'm afraid, with staff in blue-collar work on the front line, in particular the ones that are doing the manual handling, working in parks. We have operatives in T. Thomas who are maintaining all our vehicles, who are moving very large items. So it's not to say it's accepted, it absolutely isn't. So what we do regularly is training, health and safety training, everything. I mean, I'm going to say manual handling. It's far more advanced than that. Manual handling is more akin to office work. We do all sorts of training with staff. And for instance, another example is hand and arm vibration when you're using power tools, etc. We've got monitoring alarms on that for periods of time. So there's an awful lot of health and safety behind this and training. But unfortunately, this is quite common it's not acceptable, but it's quite common in manual handling. And also what we find is particularly when the weather is colder, when those staff are out and working in cold weathers, unfortunately they do tend to, if they're not as warm as they should be, and again we provide protective clothing, they do get some injuries. So what we try and do is work tirelessly with them, make sure welfare facilities are where they should be, make sure they've got the right protective kit on them, make sure we do the right amount of training. That's what we do in particular in the Communities Directorate, but again that's a corporate initiative across anybody who works on those frontline manual handling issues. It is something we keep an eye on. It's something that we regularly review in my department. I have a DMT every Thursday. We've got a DMT later on today. It is something we look at. And what you will find is the numbers are consistent every year, unfortunately. They're not rising, but they're not reducing either. So that's something that we will keep under review as we go forward. So I hope that's enough information, Councillor.
Thank you, Janine. Councillor David, the leader, has indicated he would like to make some supplementary remarks.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to explain to colleagues that this isn't confined just to the Communities Directorate. Sadly, unfortunately, manual handling is a risk across the authority. I'm thinking in particular of care workers that have to manually handle quite frequently, and it's quite a significant risk. And of course, we've got school catering staff, cleaners, etc. So we have a corporate approach to that in terms of health and safety to try and reduce that risk, with a strong focus on training and supervision to try and minimise any impact in terms of physical health. And of course, we offer refresher training as well, and we'll continue that focus on it. We've made some strides, but there is an inherent risk because of the nature of some of the work that is undertaken, particularly in the cold weather, etc., and the tasks that are being undertaken. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Leader, for those assurances. Claire Marchant, the Corporate Director for Social Services, indicated she'd like to come in.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Just to supplement what the leader has said, obviously in social services and wellbeing, sickness is a key issue for us, and manual handling. Training is mandatory for all our care staff, and in addition to everything else that has been said, if there is support that we can provide in addition, such as access to physio, we are open to funding that, and we do review people who are off for musculoskeletal related sickness reasons to see if we can support further. I think one of the impacts that we've seen particularly, we know that there have been delays in people accessing elective NHS treatment, and we will have people on waiting lists for those treatments as well, reflected in the age of our workforce. And in terms of industrial related injuries, much of our musculoskeletal related sickness is not related to work related injuries, but because of the nature of the work, people can't do their usual jobs if they are suffering with those conditions until they get the necessary treatment.
Okay, thank you very much, Claire. Councillor Bennett, you content?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's just that staff levels are obviously, they affect the ability to deliver and perform and meet our performance targets. So we want to ensure we're looking after them. So thank you very much for the comprehensive response all.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bennett. Do any other members have any comments or questions on the Communities Directorate? It won't surprise you that I have a few, Janine. Perhaps, first of all, I can refer to finance within your directorate, and you refer to the relatively low budget compared to other directorates of £29 million, and you say that out of the remaining £10 million, you have to deliver a number of statutory services. So can I ask what the value of the delivery of those statutory services amounts to? You also put quite a sobering narrative in place on some of the services which may have to cease as a result of the financial pressures. What initial work have you done to identify some of the services which may be up for cessation? And which areas are currently not meeting performance targets across your directorate? And then finally on finance, you note that there's a variance of £95,000 from within your existing directorate budgets. How will this be spread across your directorate? And have you identified any particular areas in which you need to make some savings before year end?
Right, I got quite a few of those, Chair. So if I may just tackle some of them for you. At the moment, we're underspent by 526,000, and that's mainly driven by the large volume of vacancies that we have. Now, the 95 variance, I believe that's a saving that we didn't achieve from last year, and that's a saving of we didn't manage to let me just think now. I think it was with regards to the green bags for the waste. We wanted to make a saving on green bags, and I think the other one was 60,000 for letting out the wing on Ravens Court. I think they were the two, but I might actually, the 60k might, I'd have to check. But what I would say for those two things, Chair, what we are using is the money from in year that we haven't spent is going to offset those savings that we haven't met. So the issue that we had with the green bags in particular was a very tricky one. We wanted to move the food waste from some of the recyclable bags to see if we could reduce the cost of the bag itself. But there are some issues now with Welsh Government with microplastics being released into the sea, and the bags that we wanted to source, we weren't allowed to, Chair. So we will continue with our existing bag stock and seek alternatives. But just to reassure you, that variance will be netted out from the underspend that we have in the department. With regard to services and what we'd have to cease and what our new target operating model will be going forward. I mean, that is the work I'm currently undertaking with my DMT. We did start looking at that last week. I've spoken to staff members. We are looking at what we deliver now, and there are quite a lot of things that we deliver over and above a statutory function. Now, what I would say, though, is sometimes non-statutory work is just as important. For instance, regeneration and economic development are not statutory functions, but yet both of those deliver immeasurable benefits to the council. For every pound we spend, we get £9 to £10 back. You know, the team there, if you look at some of the achievements listed in the presentation, the team have put in a LUF bid for 45 million, a shared prosperity fund bid for 20 million. They are the ones that have brought in the money from Maesteg Town Hall. You know, we've got over 50 million in the capital programme, of which 35 million is grant funding. So that team in particular isn't statutory, but it's a team that I do need to retain, incredibly important for us. And I know you'd all agree that, wouldn't you? Economic development is, and tourism, of course, which isn't statutory. And this week we approved the destination marketing plan for the borough, and we've got to recognise that back in 2019, which was the last full year of tourism before the pandemic, we had about £384 million coming into the economy and over 4,000 jobs from tourism. So again, that's not a statutory function. So it's going to be incredibly difficult, Chair, if I'm honest, to look at what it is we deliver as a communities directorate and what we do have to what services we will want to continue to deliver, but we will definitely need to look at a different target operating model. So that work is underway. Of course, we will be doing that work alongside other CMB colleagues, with CCMB and with yourselves in Scrutiny, and I'm sure that work will continue into early next year. And I don't expect it will be just me, my directorate in itself, Chair. I do know it's a piece of work we're undertaking. Now, with regard to your question about the breakdown of the budget, we have 19 million of my budget is committed in terms of contracts, and I can't touch that. And the rest of the 9 million is broken down into service areas. Now, what that will be staff costs for running the rest of my services. Now, if I had to break that down into what was regen and planning, which regen is not statutory, planning is. What I would need to do, Chair, is to come back to you with those individual breakdowns, because I wouldn't want to give you incorrect information. But the 9 million is to pay for staff costs, and there are some services in that, not just staff as well. So if you would let me, I will come back to you with that 9 million and what that breakdown is. Not a problem. Chair, have I picked up all of your questions, or were there any outstanding there?
You've done amazingly well to pick up all of those questions which I rattled off. So thank you very
brilliant.
Thank you very much, Janine, for that. And we'll just record the action that Janine's going to come back to us with the budget breakdown. Other members have picked up on the vast majority of my questions already, but I'd just like to give you the opportunity of rehearsing what was discussed yesterday, Janine. And I know members who represent Cairo would be that it's important for members for Cairo to hear this. Could you give us an update on the WB03, and that's the Cairo heat scheme, please?
Yes, of course, Chair, not a problem at all. So we have been progressing a demonstrator heat project at Cairo, the Cairo Mine Water scheme, and that was an entirely funded project by WEFO, by Europe. We have got to a position with that project. It's highly innovative. It's one of the first to ever use mine water to look to heat. We've got to a position with that project where we have designed the scheme out. However, we're at a stage now where, unfortunately, the financial model does not at this point stack up. Now, there's a number of reasons for that, not just the increasing cost of projects, inflationary costs, but also, unfortunately, we have a circumstance where we will be liable for business rates from Welsh Government. Now, some schemes, some innovative energy schemes, such as hydro schemes with water, are exempt from business rates. But at the moment, heat schemes such as heat networks, and this, which is classed as a heat network, is not exempt from business rates. And we've been having conversations with Welsh Government colleagues about this. Now, the issue that we have, Chair, is that business rate figure is a couple of million over the life of the project. And unfortunately, there isn't enough monies in the fund currently to be able to take that project forward. Now, it was always a demonstrator project, but what WEFO have asked us to do is to put a toolkit together, because it was so innovative and we've learned so much from it, put a toolkit together which explains how you would go about starting a project of this nature, who you speak to, how you get it designed, how you test it, etc. And also a comprehensive lessons learned piece. Because the reason for that is there's quite a lot of local authorities up in the north of England who really want to look at this scheme, a scheme of this nature, and take it forward. So what WEFO have asked us is they understand we can't go forward physically with the scheme right now, but they've asked us to come forward with that toolkit that other authorities can use and the lessons learned piece. Now, what it doesn't mean we will never undertake that scheme. It just means at this moment in time, we can't add that financial burden to the council, particularly with our MTFSs in place. So as it stands, the scheme will not physically go forward. However, we've got a bit of work to do on that toolkit and lessons learned piece. Now, we may revisit it in the future. We're having ongoing discussions with the Welsh Government, because what is important is we've got a number of other schemes coming forward, but the Bridgend heat network, we want to do ground source heat pumps, etc. So, and we're not the only authority doing that, Chair. There's authorities all over Wales. So Welsh Government will have to look at this issue and decide whether these schemes will be exempt going forward, because there are fine margins currently, because the technology is still quite expensive. So just to be clear, the scheme, the actual physicality of the scheme won't continue, but there's quite a bit of work going on behind the scenes in terms of this toolkit, and then we can see in the future whether we can revisit it, because it would have been a fantastic scheme. And I have to say the staff are incredibly disappointed, Chair. They have literally had blood, sweat and tears over this the last 2 years. It was fully funded. This is not something we want to walk away from, I can assure you. But at this point, we won't continue with the scheme. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Janine, for that comprehensive response. Councillor Paul Davis would like to come in now.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank the Director for the update. You know, I am obviously disappointed as a kind of member. This has been going on since virtually the day I was elected in 2017. You know, the actual project in in its entirety. I think it was a good project for Kyra. There was some small local, there was some local opposition, especially near the drilling sites. Obviously, you know, no one wants drilling near the properties, which you can understand. But that had been done, and let's hope it is revisited, you know, going forward. That's all we could say at this stage. I have picked up something else, Chair, off the on page 49, WB03 0.23. It's an amber, and it talks about. I didn't bring this up earlier. Sorry, apologies, Chair. It's snuck right in the middle here. It says reduction of disposal fees for residential waste at the Materials Recovery and Energy Centre, MREC. Now, we were paying at quite extortionate sort of rates of disposal down there. Has there been any change in that? I'd like to ask the Director, Chair, recently, because I think there was a legal battle going on, from what I can understand. I don't want to say too much about that, but are we still paying a lot of money for that? Are you trying to, is that what we're talking about, trying to get that figure down to a more acceptable level for disposal?
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Janine, please.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Davis. Yeah, you are right. We have had some reduction in the MREC agreement that we have with Neath Port Talbot. This agreement was put in some time ago because, of course, they are the people who look after the waste that we transport over there. It's a difficult situation and going forward, because the agreement is up in a couple of years' time, and we need to make sure whatever new agreement we go into works for us at Bridgend, because of course we're reviewing our waste collection regime for 2026. So in short, that is a saving that we've achieved. But this is an agreement that was signed some time ago, Chair, so I'm afraid there's very little wriggle room in terms of the legal agreement. And again, just to say, you know, some of this cost is also borne by Neath Port Talbot, so they are as keen as us to look at ways of reducing some of the cost to this. However, what I would say is that we have a very, very successful working operation with them. You know, we have managed to become the second highest recycling targets. I did mention earlier in Wales with over 72%. So whilst it is probably more expensive than we would like, and Leith but Talbot feel the same, it is a very, very successful operation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Janine. Councillor Davis?
I recognise and applaud the fact that we're on the top of the recycling, tables, Chair, and hopefully when my stake and pile open, we'll become even higher. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davis. We've given you a fair grill in there, Janine. So, and I'm conscious that we're well over time. So it's now time for Councillor Blundell and Lindsay Harvey, the Corporate Director for Education and Family Support, to have the same grilling. So I'll hand over to Lindsay to give us a very brief introduction to his Directorate's performance before we take any questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. For the purpose of the recording, I'm Lindsay Harvey. I'm Corporate Director for Education and Family Support. So, Leader, I'll give you a whistle, Leader and Chair, I should say, I'll give you a whistle-stop run through of the Directorate's performance. So, positive overall picture with regard to education in Bridgend. I'm pleased to note, Chair, that currently Bridgend has no schools in any form of Esting category of concern. So, this is a significant achievement. There's been a strong drive, as you know, as a member of School Improvement Group, to ensure all schools have effective evaluation and improvement processes in place, and this has been validated by recent Esting Local Authority Link Inspector meetings. I must note, Chair, and I'm sure you'd agree with me, my huge thanks to schools and governing bodies for the enormous amount of work they have done over the past 3 years and continue to do to provide our school children and young people with the best possible learning experiences. There have been significant improvements in the Bridgend Youth Justice Service, as noted by Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Probation. It still requires further improvement, but certainly moving in the right direction. Our Welsh and Education Strategic Plan has been approved by Welsh Government, and tomorrow we'll be submitting our operational plan to Welsh Government for the first 5 years of the WESP. Safeguarding audits have now been completed in all schools. We'll be providing Cabinet with an update in the new year. Team Around the Family, as you know, Chair, provides this service to families who are likely to need help for 2 or more agencies, for example, schools, social care, health services and housing. Performance has exceeded target, which is a reflection of the endeavours of family support workers and our early help hubs, against a backdrop of a huge increase in referrals and also in the complexity of those referrals. This indicator is one of many that actually measures quality as opposed to simple quantity. With regard to school modernisation, while the programme is rated as green, it remains largely on track. There are significant challenges regarding supply of resources and cost inflation. As far as funding is concerned, members will note that the budget for the Education and Family Support Directorate for 22-23 is approximately 132 million. The current year-end projected outturn is around 132,102,000, with a projected underspend of 217,000. This is mainly due to vacancy management. However, Chair, based on current intelligence, that underspend will be exhausted largely by home to school transport pressures, and I will report in a very different position in Q3. Over 90% of the Directorate's budget is allocated to support statutory school-related activity. With regard to budget savings, the Q2 position for the Directorate is that the £68,000 saving for this year will not be met. Welsh Government has changed the terms and conditions of the grant for a particular service area, and this has impacted on the core budget and deliverability of the proposal. Demand on early help and education psychology services remains high, and we're working with partners to support identified needs. The issues regarding staff absence and staff training have been covered by Mark and Kelly, and in my colleagues' responses to members' questions today. However, it's worth noting specifically for my directorate, there are still significant staffing challenges across service areas, in particular the catering service, those who support children with emotional, social and behavioural difficulties and special needs support assistance. So overall, Chair, positive picture, albeit one with some challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Councillor Blundell, as the Cabinet Member for Education, do you have anything to add, or you're happy?
Nothing major to add, Chair, just to say obviously very positive picture that Lindsay's outlined there, especially if we have no school in any Esting review, and our Youth Justice Service was also taken out of special measures earlier. I'd love to take all the credit myself, but as coming in May, but no, it's down to the hard work of our dedicated officers and senior management team led by our Director. But happy to answer. I can see hands are going up, so I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Well, congratulations to you all on the positive outlook. But Councillor Paul Davis has a question on permanent exclusions, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm on page, let me get it back up, Chair. Page 50, top of page 56, Chair, in the list there. Permanent exclusions continue to cause some challenges for schools. Could you give us an update on the narrow point of exclusions, Lindsay? The figures, are they increased or decreased, or just give us a general sort of overview? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Through you, Chair. Yes, it's a picture that is concerning. Permanent exclusion has caused some challenges for schools, and we suspect that some of the challenges have been related to the pandemic. We are seeing learners that are coming back to schools after a period of significant absence, and some of the learning behaviour is challenging. To date this year, there have been 4 permanent exclusions in Bridgend schools. This is significant. Generally speaking, Bridgend's permanent exclusions are very low. But again, this year, in line with the pressures that all local authorities across Wales have faced, we are seeing more fixed-term exclusions and more permanent exclusions. To ally this, we have identified this as being a significant issue for the Directorate, and we have identified a need to establish a task and finish group, which is currently in session, working with schools on this to develop a policy and strategy to support this. And again, I'd be more than happy to supply members with the detail. Thank you, Councillor Davis. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Davis, you happy with that?
Yeah, I'm happy, Chair. I know Amanda wants to come in.
Yes,
so
yeah.
I give way to
Councillor Hugh David would like to intervene, and then I'll bring in Councillor Amanda Williams.
Thanks, Chair. Just wanted to reassure colleagues that whilst those pupils have been permanently excluded from the schools, we continue to offer them education, and we have a very effective managed move protocol in Bridgend, where we will move that young person to another secondary school, and they are very encouraging examples of where that managed move has been successful. Myself and Councillor Blundell and the Director were in a secondary school recently, and we met a pupil that is making very good progress in their new school. They had been permanently excluded, and again, to reassure colleagues, permanent exclusion is absolutely the last resort. And whilst 4 is 4 too many, we have over 20,000 children across our schools in the county borough, and only in very serious circumstances does that exclusion take place. But we will make every effort to support them in mainstream settings if we can. If we cannot do that, then it will be in our very specialist settings, Ysgol Castell or the bridge provision. And we will feed back to the school improvement group that you chair, and also happy to bring an update back to members. But this is a pattern that we are seeing across Wales, and I'm sure the Director and Cabinet Member can confirm that, sadly. So we are not alone. So we do recognise that this can be attributed to some of the societal changes we've seen over recent years, and is the most extreme manifestation, we believe, in part to the lockdown and COVID, the impact that has had, the cost of living crisis, and the other wider societal factors that are impacting upon children and young people across the UK. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Leader. And I know that Councillor John Paul Blundell would like to come in as the Cabinet Member for Education.
Yes, thank you. Again, Chair, just to build on what the Leader said there, obviously we will work with the child to find the right setting for them, whether that be the Peru, whether that be YBC, whether that be another mainstream comprehensive school in our county borough. Yeah, I've met with all bar one of our head teachers in our comprehensive schools already, and they all say the same thing. It's not something they want to do. They want to make sure they keep their child in school because it's really a really important thing. I can confirm what the Leader was saying as well. We have brought a paper recently, earlier this year, to your committee, Chair, Overview and Scrutiny Committee 1, and we will happily come back again in the new year when we have more further information and further updates on the work that's been carried out by the team in the Directorate. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bundle. I know Councillor Amanda Williams would like to come in on the same point, permanent exclusions.
Thanks very much, Chair. I just wanted to raise, as a governor in a primary and a comprehensive school, that I've seen the increase since the pandemic. I've been sitting on a number of panels to look at children and their temporary and permanent exclusions. But I think some schools have now recognised they're having so many safeguarding referrals are being submitted, and behaviour is such a big issue that they've had to now employ their own social workers or specific staff to deal with such children and the behaviour issues, because they were taking up all of their time dealing with this. So I wondered, as part of this group then, will you be looking at best practice and looking at those schools who've been able to bring in additional staff, and also those schools who can't afford to bring in this additional staff, how are you going to support them to make sure that they've got the same services and can offer the same support to children? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Just as a rider to that as well, the leader and the cabinet member and my colleagues in Pencoed, I know this may affect comprehensive schools or secondary education rather than primary education, but I was very impressed with how Pencoed Primary School have a more holistic view of supporting families, in that they've appointed somebody to actually liaise directly with families and assess what their overall needs are, and they get to know families in depth to try and address any of these concerns at an early stage. So perhaps that's a piece of best practice which can be rolled out across the local authority if possible. But I'll now bring in the Cabinet Member, John Paul Blundell, and then if Lindsay wants to add any supplementary remarks.
Yeah, just to comment on Councillor Williams and yourself, Chair, Councillor Williams's comments there. Yes, we are looking at best practice. The team are always looking at where best they can improve. We were very impressed with Pencoed Primary on Friday, as you know, about how they're working with families openly, but that's not happening it won't be able to happen at every school, because school budgets are very tight especially in our smaller schools. Like Councillor Amanda Williams, I'm a governor at both a comprehensive and an infant school, and it's very different worlds and the budgets are very different. So we are looking at best practice and how we can support those. And as I said, we'll be looking at this in greater detail in the new year, and then happy again to come back to scrutiny as always to look at this further down the line. I don't know if Lindsay has any more.
Thank you, Councillor Bundle. Lindsay, please.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Williams, for the question. Absolutely, with regard to the Task and Finish group, this part of the group's remit is to look at identifying and sharing best practice, so we'll certainly do that. With regard to the point, Chair, you've raised with the Family Liaison Officer in Pencoed, of course, this was part funded by the local authority and Welsh Government funding as part of the Community School Focus Schools initiative. So again, a very an important initiative. And again, this is really built on some of the outstanding work that Pencoed Primary School has had in place for many years. I know this because my son has sent to the school, and I can bear personal testimony that they've done a great job there. Interestingly, yesterday afternoon, myself, the leader, and Councillor Bundle went to a primary school, one of our Valley primary schools, and they commented on some of the additional support they've received with regard to pupils from the local authority, with those with behavioural support. So that was really positive to hear, and it was delightful to see the learners with very happy environments and working, to the best of their ability. So that was really pleasing. I think the point that Councillor Williams also raised, an important one, which I covered in my preamble, is some of the challenges we have with recruiting special needs support assistants. This has been particularly challenging because the skill set of these people it needs a lot of skill to deal with some learners with behavioural difficulties, and also it's been a challenge to recruit them. And again, that's something we really continue to do. One thing you've seen from the summary I provided to Chair is the fact that we do have an integrated model of support in Bridgend. With regard to education, we benefit strongly from school-based counsellors and family support colleagues. So again, this benefits from learners benefit from this. And the last point I want to make is hot off the press, really, which is really good news. We met with an Estin colleague last week who was looking at best practice of pupil referral units across Wales, and Bridgend has been asked to provide an effective case study for publication on the website. So I'm delighted to recommend that to this board, but particular just to thank Michelle Joyner, who's head of the PRU, again on some outstanding work they do in there.
Thank you, Lindsay. I'm sure you'd all echo that. Councillor Amanda Williams, is it on this point or is it on a different point?
The next point, I was getting my hand ready, thanks.
Oh, okay, right. Well, I've kept Councillor Pennell-Thomas waiting for far too long, so I'll bring him in next.
Thanks, Chair. You're just lucky and very patient in nature. That's absolutely fine. I just wanted to touch specifically on Welsh language provision. There's absolutely no denying that the lyrics to Yma o hyd over the last couple of weeks are better understood and used by a larger proportion of the Welsh population. But perhaps surprising to me on a personal level was the downward trend of the recent census statistics. I understand in Bridgend the percentage of Welsh speakers fell from 9.7 in 2011 to 9.2% in the recent census last year. Absolutely understand that the director loves a good challenge, but does this present a headache for us here in Bridgend in terms of Welsh language provision through schools? Does it mean that we have to redouble our efforts to ensure that we reach our targets? But this isn't necessarily just about target setting, it's also about promoting the Welsh language as best as we possibly can and the myriad of benefits that come from its use, not just in schools, but in the workplace as well.
Thank you, Councillor Pennell-Thomas. The Cabinet Member, Councillor Blundell first.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Pennell-Thomas, for the question. No, you're quite right. We need to see the growth of the Welsh language, and indeed, the national football team has definitely expressed that with the song Yma o hyd. It's definitely on my playlist constantly over the use of it during the World Cup. You are right. We need to expand and the Welsh language provision in this natural use, not just I'm here to speak Welsh to you today. Yesterday, myself, the leader and director, went to Faldai Primary in the Garrow Valley, where we met some of the children, and they first of all came up to us with Breham Da and Satoiti. You know, it did throw me off guard at first, I have to admit, because you know I'm a very basic Welsh learner, as many of you will know. But it was great to see that they do that, and it's natural. It's every child that does that. So, and I understand that in the recent census results, it's not been a very positive outlook for many parts of South Wales. But we feel we're going to address that in our WESP, our most ambitious WESP that I think the council has ever produced. Even when I met with the minister recently about it, he said, this is extremely ambitious, and we are very ambitious about that. We want to see the growth of the Welsh language through the medium of education, through using it in everyday language, so that some people may not put themselves down as Welsh speaker on the census, but just using that natural bit of Welsh keeps the history and keeps the nationhood alive through that language. So that's really all I wanted to say on that, but I'm sure Lindsay will come in with a bit more technical about how we're going to do that. Thank you.
Right, diolch, Councillor Blundell. Lindsay?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Pennell-Thomas. You probably know what I'm about to say. I'm passionate about the Welsh language. So I'll just set out very quickly some of the targets and some of the operational detail, really, of how we're going to make sure our WESP succeeds. So, as you know, the WESP sets out our targets over the next 10 years. And there's some key targets within that, which I'll just share very briefly with you. Now, we've set a target, a very ambitious target, as Councillor Blundell has said, of 300 reception places being available for Welsh medium learners by the end of the planned period. And that's an additional 138 additional places across our schools. Now, this equates to 10 forms of entry, so a significant uplift in our Welsh medium education across the period. Now, how are we going to achieve that? So a couple of key things. We referred earlier to the childcare hubs in Betws and Blackmill, and we're opening a further 2 in the next couple of months. Substantial increase in the numbers attending our Tier V groups. We are planning for a seedling school in Porthcawl, increasing the numbers on roll and to provide new bills for Ysgol Cymraeg Brogo and Ysgol y Ferch Ysge. We're currently undertaking site options appraisals with regard to Ysgol Gyfun Llangynoed and establishing late immersion provision in one of our primary schools. Very proud that we've established 2 learning resources now for learners with additional needs in 2 Welsh medium schools, which is a very big plus point for this local authority. And in addition to that, we're auditing staff language skills across schools to make sure that Welsh language competency framework is supported. And finally, I think one of the key things that we are trying to do is it's just not about schools. Being an education and family support director, we're obviously working with family groups to make sure that we can establish a growing use of Welsh in family settings. So hopefully that answers your question, Councillor Bennett-Thomas, and thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Councillor Bennett-Thomas, you content?
Yeah, that's great, thanks. And I think Councillor Blundell should be congratulated for embracing the Welsh language. Llongyfarchiadau da iawn, Councillor Blundell.
Oh, very good. Right, dwi'n siarad Cymraeg ond dydy ddim yn rhugl eto. Right, next we've got Councillor Amanda Williams.
Thanks. I'm not going to try and follow any of that Welsh because my Welsh knowledge is really poor, I'm afraid. My second question was on free school meals, and my concern here is I know you're looking at new builds and everything, but what happens with the extensions on schools? Coety's one, I think Pencoed's another, and making sure that those additional children will come with additional hall space to feed those children. Because at the moment, I'll give you an example in Coety, lunch starts between 11:30 and 12:15 and finishes at 1:15. However, with increased children in there, if the hall space is the same, then the dinner is going to have to run an hour each side, which is going to be ridiculous for small children to be asked to wait until 2 o'clock, 2:15 for their food, or for nursery children to be eating at 10:30, 10:45, and then go the rest of the day without any food. Again, they won't be able to cope. So my concern is at the moment we've got specific, we haven't got everyone having school dinners because there's not, they're not free, but I think once they are free, you'll have an increase in children having school dinners. And then once you extend these schools, you'll have more children wanting school dinners as well. So I've got a big concern about that. And secondly, with regards to staffing these, I know the significant staffing issues, particularly for dinner ladies, because it's not an ideal job. It's an hour or two in the middle of the day. Now, I've had a number of people contact me and say that they would be interested in doing that sort of job because they haven't got employment at the moment and they are looking for work. However, they've been told that their benefits would be taken away from them if they accepted these 5-6 hours a week. So I'm thinking, what can we do as an authority to work with these individuals who, whilst looking for work, can step in and provide support where we're missing a lot of these staff members? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I'm going to group some questions on the universal free school meal provision, if I may, because I know a number of members have got some concerns about this, especially given the challenges of delivery and catering services, which has been rehearsed in the performance dashboard, and the fact that some of the facilities that we have in some schools are not up to scratch yet to be able to roll out the Welsh Government's commitment to deliver universal free school meals to all primary school children by 2024. So Councillor Paul Davis, is it on this particular issue? Because I want to try and group. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is.
So I know Councillor Paul Davis has got a question on this then, and I know Councillor Ross Pennell-Thomas will come in after that.
It's very similar to what Amanda was saying about the hour, an hour here, an hour there type of thing, Chair. You know, it's not a. Lindsay mentioned earlier that there's 90 places they can't fill. You know, well, as you say, it's difficult for a lot of people to take 1 hour a day. They're not very attractive to people. How can we make the job more attractive, really, isn't it, for people to take them, I suppose? It's very similar to Amanda's, really.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Davis. And Councillor Pennell-Thomas, I know you don't have your hand up, but I'm calling you in anyway.
Thanks very much, Chair. Obviously, you've already alluded to the number of infrastructure challenges which we have across a number of our sites, which we are readily working our way through. I'm aware there are a handful of schools that are fully prepared at this point in time to be able to roll out to the entire cohort of their schools. Given the cost of living crisis and the challenges that many parents are now facing, I wondered if that had been considered, even as a pilot, if not as a wider rollout to those schools who are able to do so. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much to all contributors. Thank you, Councillor Pennell-Thomas. I'll bring in Councillor Blundell first to set the context, and then Lindsay can come in with some supplementary comments.
Fabulous. Thank you again, Chair. The members do raise very valid points there. It is a logistical challenge, as we can't eat into teaching time in schools about how, as Councillor Davis and Councillor Amanda Williams both said, about an hour here, an hour there. It is something we are raising with the Minister on the political level to see what can be done. We are looking at other authorities who are doing this. We aren't the only authority who has raised this issue, but we are seeing about what can be done. The team are a very experienced team in our catering service here in the borough, so we are working with them and working across the county to see what can be done. On the issue of staffing, yes, we have managed to recruit some more catering staff, but as you say, it isn't enough. I've got a plan. Maybe all 51 councillors could do it. An hour here, but we are working. We've got a member of staff who goes into the job centre 1 day a week and say, "Oh, you look like you could do school catering. Come with me. We'll get you." And so we have managed to get some staff through in that way. On the issue of the buildings, we are continuing to work. Obviously, again, as with every project is going at the moment, who knew so much was made in Ukraine? I didn't before this. I think, so we are working through it. We are positive. We are looking at maybe year ones and year twos. Maybe we could roll that out in April if we get a good headwind and everything goes the right way. On Councillor Thomas's point about having some start and some don't, it is a tricky one because we don't really want it to turn into a postcode lottery. We don't, because I know in my area, I've got one school that could do it, but the one up the road couldn't. And, they're both buildings that were built in the 1960s. So it's not like they're brand new buildings. So we are trying to work a way to make sure that we can get this rolled out as soon as possible. Because, members will know we're pushing out an open door here. We want this to succeed. We managed to lobby the Welsh Government for further funding to help us with those projects as well. So we are working on that basis. But I'm sure Lindsay will come in with some more of the technical details for you. But thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bundle. Bring in Lindsay now. So just as a rider to that, though, it's a question of equity then with regards to any pilot projects for schools which already have the capability to deliver these services?
For me, equity is important. I don't want it to turn into a postcode lottery that some kids get it and some kids don't, because it just wouldn't be fair, and I don't think we should punish children just because of the school they go to doesn't have a kitchen at this present moment in time. Okay, thanks for your comments. Lindsay?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the question, Councillor Williams. Just to build on what Councillor Blundell has said, really, we'll all be aware that the Welsh Government has asked local authorities to provide the universal free school meal offer to all primary learners from September 24. Now, in Bridgend, we have around 27%, of around 6,000 of our 23,000 learners who are eligible for free school meals. So they generally receive those already. One of the things that we have done as part of the initiative, we've reviewed all of our kitchens and undertaken significant surveys in all settings. Now, as Councillor Amanda Williams has identified, there are logistical issues. There are pressures on curriculum time, because obviously we need to make sure that's not squeezed. There's significant pressures, as I previously indicated, with regard to catering service staff. The kitchen facilities, some of the challenges we've had is a supply of goods such as dishwashers, commercial dishwashers, and other equipment for the kitchen has been problematic. Because again, one of the challenges we've got, there are 21 other local authorities in Wales who are after the same machinery. So that's an additional challenge. As part of our surveys, I know I've been working very closely with Janine's team. Corporate landlord have been supporting some of the additional electrical loads we need in the kitchen. So again, it's quite a technical approach to get this up and running. To answer Councillor Amanda Williams' question about what we're doing around staffing, one of the things that we are looking at is whether we can localise contracts. And what I mean by that is if you've got staff who are working in schools as perhaps teaching assistants, as cleaners, and as staff within kitchen settings, is whether or not we can make sure that they are dedicated to a school, and that's certainly proven to be attractive. There's some challenges around that, because obviously we don't want to adversely affect, for example, cleaning services where they're deployed separately. With regard to our schools, out of our 48 primary, infant, junior schools, with 3 are ready, so they're good to go. 14 need work, and 5 need extensive work. So that's the challenge we are facing. And again, as Councillor Blundell has said, we are keen to make sure that we accelerate this programme for all, and I think that's important. So again, like Councillor Blundell, I wouldn't particularly be keen on piloting. I'd rather put all of our efforts into making sure as many learners can get this provision as soon as possible. To answer, well, not to answer actually, but to say a follow-up to Councillor Amanda Williams' question with regard to benefits. I'm no expert in that, Chair, but I'll certainly speak to Caris's team. We'll get further information on how that affects going forward. So again, I'm more than happy any questions on that. I'll happily answer them.
Thanks for providing that additional detail, Lindsay. Councillor Graham Walter, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I say this with the greatest deal of respect. Most of these things that we're discussing are, of course, important, and they do need to be investigated. But we are going very deep into operational detail, most of which can be covered in the appropriate scrutiny committees. This is a corporate overview and scrutiny committee. Might I suggest, in the interest of time and expediency, that we try not to go too deep into the operational detail. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution, Councillor Walter, but we are actually considering the performance of every single directorate, so we can certainly put issues which you'd like to delve into in more detail on our forward work programme, but we are here to assess the corporate performance of the organisation, so we'll continue to assess issues which members would like to raise. Are there any issues that anyone else would like to raise within the Education Directorate? The only issue that I'd like to raise, and then we can come to a conclusion on the Education Directorate, is regarding one of the high corporate risks which you cite in the report, and that's the delivery of the 21st Century School Modernisation Programme. Now, my assumption was that this was from an earmarked capital budget reserve, so I'm just wondering, how is it at risk of delivery, Lindsay?
Thanks, Chair. It's as I mentioned earlier, really, the overall programme is rated as green. The challenge within this is cost inflation, so this wouldn't be escalated as a separate corporate risk. It would be absorbed within that larger one, because obviously cost inflation affects activity across the Directorate and across the organisation.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. We'll now bring that to a conclusion and move on to Appendix D, pages 65 to 81 in members' packs, and that is to consider the Social Services and Wellbeing Directorate. The Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Social Services has sent her apologies, so we'll go straight over to Claire, who can provide a short introduction. Welcome, Claire.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I will be very succinct because I've set out quite a lot of information in terms of the overview within the dashboard that's been set out. But just very briefly, I think what is evident from the performance within the dashboard and also from my overview is that there is an alignment within the Social Services and Wellbeing Directorate of increasing need and demand for services and for statutory support, with workforce pressures which are very evident throughout the dashboard, particularly in children's social work and social care workers in both children's residential and indeed in adult home care services, with financial pressures, and that for us means that the effort to maintain good performance in terms of both quantitative and quality performance has been a challenge, but it is pleasing nonetheless to see greens within the dashboard, and that reflects on the incredible hard work of our frontline workforce and indeed of our managerial colleagues as well within the directorate. So the focus is on getting the basics right in terms of performance, quality, workforce, hearing the voice of the person and partnership. Particularly in children's social care, the increase in demand has been exponential, and I know individual scrutiny committees have had information on that detail. The workforce pressures are key right across the authority, aren't they, and a significant corporate risk for us in the corporate risk register. For us in social services and wellbeing, it's not an option not to fill those posts when they are vacant and when we are struggling to recruit, hence the level of agency within our workforce. It's really good that the dashboards incorporate now the regulatory improvements. So you see the detail in there of the performance evaluation, inspection action plan from CIW in respect of children's social care, and also the priority action notices in terms of any regulated services. Since the end of Q2, CIW have been in to undertake a further improvement check in children's social care. And I am hopeful by the time we look at Q3 that we'll have published letter from CIW to be able to reflect that. In terms of budget, obviously it's a very pressured area, and the key areas of pressure are around the fulfilling of people's needs in line with their statutory care and support plans, and also that position in terms of agency workforce, particularly in children's social care. And we've put forward significant pressures, I think, going into next year relating to both workforce and service provision. In terms of strategic progress, whilst we are managing in terms of the particular pressures within the service, and you heard yesterday in council from the health board around the situation in terms of business continuity there, and we're key part of that response from adult social care services. We do continue to progress the strategic work because it is very important that we plan our way out of crises, and the overview reflects some of that strategic work as well. It's important that I reflect the whole of the directorate in my introductory remarks. So we continue to see excellent outcomes in our prevention and wellbeing services, and we do continue to work with our key partners in Halo and Arwen about both post-COVID recovery in terms of participation levels. So our focus really is on managing and mitigating risks, dealing with the issues that we face, and trying to ensure that we both make rapid improvements and sustainable improvements, which is the challenge which our regulator set us, but it is the right challenge, and obviously happy to take all questions.
Thank you very much for that overview, Claire. Are there any questions from members? Well, Councillor Penhill-Thomas, are you taking Councillor Walters' suggestion then? Councillor Penhill-Thomas, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. Can I just touch on the percentage of care leavers who have completed at least 3 consecutive months of employment? Can you, if the director can just touch on why that's red? And as a rider to that, obviously the director will be aware of the Welsh Government pilot for a basic income, which is for care leavers. Do we have any of our care leavers in receipt of that? And are we, well, what's the sort of interim feedback that we're having as to the success or otherwise of that? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. It's a really important indicator for us because it's one that speaks to outcomes as opposed to just quantitative activity. And interestingly, there's 2 targets in this area. This one is red. The one over 2 years is green. So it's one where I think we need to be really ambitious in terms of our targets. A couple of things to say. The first is that not all care leavers stay in touch with us. That is their right once they're post-18, and so the actual performance is based on those who are actively working with us. So it's not always a complete picture. I think the second thing to say is that this is an important indicator where the responsibility is not just within our directorate, it is a whole council responsibility, and we've recently strengthened our corporate parenting arrangements quite considerably. There's a corporate parenting strategic board which is chaired by the deputy leader and brings together partners not just from within the authority but from right across the key partners in Bridgend, including Bridgend College, including partners from Careers Wales, etc. And all of those organisations have got a responsibility to work very closely together to provide all the support that's needed for care leavers in order to support their education, employment, attainment and achievements. So this is a key focus for that group is to improve the performance here. We're working on our corporate parenting strategy, which will be completed by the end of this financial year, very much being driven by children and young people themselves. This will be a key element where partners will be pledging how they're going to support to achieve. And some of the challenges to us as a council as well as an employer, isn't it, is how we are supporting things like care leave or apprenticeships. What's the good practice out there for other areas? We've got new management in our 16+ team, which is bringing, I would say, a refreshed energy to this area as well. And in terms of that new management, real focus on the pathway plans for young people to make sure that those pathway plans reflect the aspirations and the outcomes for children and young people.
Thank you very much. Sorry, as you know, I'm epileptic, and unfortunately I had a short episode then, but hopefully I'm back in the room now. I'll go to Councillor Paul Davis now, please.
Thank you, Chair. Hope you're okay there, Chair. On page, let me get back to the dashboard. Page 81, we have the sickness for the directorate. You have musculoskeletal, which is quite high. I'm assuming that's because, you know, the lifting of people and for carers and stuff. We have the dreaded, you know, stress and anxiety, depression, which is very high as well. Could the director give us some indication of their own figures and what has been done to sort of alleviate these issues, especially the stress and anxiety one, you know, which it says not work related. That, sorry, apologies. And you got the work related below that, which is 538 figure. What's been done to sort of alleviate them, if she can, please?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, Councillor. It's a really important one. I think I picked up earlier on in the meeting the work that's happening around musculoskeletal. And for us, I would advise, as I did earlier, you know, we've got quite an ageing workforce, but particularly in our care and support at home workforce. And with age comes many things, but often musculoskeletal challenges. And because of the nature of the work, sometimes people will not be in work for a period, whereas if they were working in other types of jobs, they could perhaps continue whilst waiting for appointments and procedures. We do look with colleagues in HR at anything that we can do to expedite, anything we can do in terms of access to physio ourselves as an authority, to make sure that we're being as proactive as we can. We also look at opportunities to deploy people differently for a period, which can be quite challenging, but really very focused on that area. Then, apart from musculoskeletal, the two biggest areas for us as a directorate are the stress, anxiety, depression, both work-related and non-work related. And obviously, again, we touched on this earlier council-wide in the meeting. But, you know, what we see is there's a strong interrelationship between work-related and non-work related, and there can often be issues at home, issues in work which interrelate. It's been a very long period of operating at a very high level of escalation, if I say that, across services in social services and wellbeing. You know, we moved into the pandemic lockdowns, didn't we, in March 2020, and that's a long time ago. That really impacted on our workforce, most of whom are frontline, whether you're a social worker or a social care worker, or whether you support that area. You continue to work in the most challenges of circumstances throughout the pandemic. And then particularly in terms of our children's social care, it's been a time of significant challenge, hasn't it? Significant focus. And we've worked really hard and put in significant wellbeing support working with corporate colleagues, not just in terms of the general wellbeing support, but very focused wellbeing support in terms of specialist trauma-informed support for individuals and for teams, but also through our social care workforce development team. You know, that wellbeing in the workplace, day in day out support to keep teams going and to keep teams in work, and that will continue because I think the longevity of the challenges that we're facing mean that we can't really take our eye off the ball at all around that. One of the other things that we're looking at and seeing whether we can put in place some arrangements around this within the directorate, given the nature of the work. Other public sector organisations have got arrangements called TRIM, and particularly the ambulance trust and the police when there is traumatic nature to some of the work that's undertaken. There are peer-led immediate responses, and we will look to see whether we can at least pilot that in part of the directorate in the new year. The other thing I would say in terms of that support is support for managers. We've got a big management development programme being delivered by an improvement partner, IPC, and part of the managerial role is really that focus on good quality professional supervision, because that's absolutely key to understanding both professional oversight, but also the personal and professional challenges people face in undertaking the jobs they do on behalf of the council.
Thank you very much, Claire, and apologies once again for my unprofessionalism. I'll go to Councillor Pennell-Thomas now.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. I did have a query in my last question around the basic income trial, but I'm happy in the interest of time. No worries, Claire. I'm happy in the interest of time to take that conversation offline. Given the overall overarching performance, I think it would be remiss of this committee not to touch on and ask you to rehearse in a public forum perhaps some of the challenges around workforce development. You may have seen an article yesterday by BBC Wales that showed 34.4% vacancies of social workers in Bridgend, in the top 3 highest in Wales. I think it's worth us just discussing very briefly, given the interest of time, what plan is in place to try and get us beyond that threshold, to lower it so that we're more in line with what other local authorities. I think if I remember correctly, Neath Talbot neighbouring to us was 4.3% in terms of vacancies. Thanks.
Thanks very much, and I do apologise for not picking up that basic income pilot. We, in common with other authorities in Wales, are working towards implementing that from the beginning of the next financial year, and I can provide more details into a specific scrutiny committee and certainly corporate parenting cabinet committee around that implementation. In terms of workforce, it is our most significant issue and indeed risk if it were to worsen, because we can have all the other plans that we like, but unless we've got the workforce to deliver those plans, then we're not going to be successful. And obviously the level of vacancies and the level of consequent agency, if I talk just about children's social care and children's social work, is a real issue for us here in Bridgend. So in terms of the plans, we've got a very comprehensive workforce plan. We've got a project which meets fortnightly to oversee that plan. There's a range of short, medium and long-term actions within that plan. In the short term, we have recognised that we are quite likely to be reliant on agency for some foreseeable future. But what is really important is if we engage agency workforce, is that doesn't impact on the quality of the outcomes for the children and families, whilst it does clearly impact on us financially. So we expect and require our agency workforce to undertake all the same training, supervision that we do for other parts of our workforce. We have a mantra that when you're with us, you're one of us, and that's really key and critical for us. And what we've done is to be far more strategic and long-term in how we've engaged agency. That's not a position we want to be in, but it is accepting a reality because of the challenges in recruiting across the whole of Wales. We're up in our marketing. You'll see the 12 jobs of Christmas, which is a fantastic internal marketing campaign, and we're going to have bespoke and dedicated 2-year EMR funded marketing post for us in social services and wellbeing to promote opportunities. In the slightly more medium term, we're progressing international recruitment of social workers. We have colleagues due to join us in the new year, and you know, we need to again as a whole council really make sure that we make a success of that international recruitment. And in the longer term, we have significantly increased the number of social workers that we're growing ourselves. We took on 7 at the start of the last academic year, 8 at the start of this academic year. And we know that if we train and develop our own social workers, that they do stay in the authority in which they are trained and developed. That's got a longer lead-in time. And what we have to do is to make sure that we keep those numbers that we support ourselves to become professionally qualified as we move into next year, because that's the key to our medium-term success. And those authorities that you see who've got those lower percentage levels move to a far bigger grow your own programme sooner, because the sad reality when you look at the numbers on the social work course is that you're not seeing places being filled in any numbers by non-sponsored students, despite the fact that Welsh Government have very recently reintroduced the bursary programme, which is really good news story. We have a similar plan in terms of our social care workforce, and we are working very closely with Bridgend College in terms of those pathways through into care. We're taking forward joint recruitment with the Health Board because we see that there may be a little bit more success in that area, and we're reviewing all of our contractual arrangements as well to make sure we're offering the most attractive contracts to people to work in social care, and really supporting colleagues as well to keep their registration and their re-registration requirements. So I'm apologies for talking fast in the interest of time, but there is a lot of detail, and I'm happy to take more detail into other scrutiny committees as well.
Thank you very much, Claire. I'll bring in the leader, and then we'll bring in Councillor Bennett and hopefully conclude this item. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Just to advise members that Welsh Government have commissioned Cardiff University to undertake a evaluation of the basic income pilot scheme for care leavers. I did have the opportunity recently to meet with some care leavers from across Wales as WLJ spokesperson, and the feedback was very positive about the impact of the scheme. So no doubt that will be shared when the work is completed, the research into the scheme. And then just to add, the director's given a comprehensive update on workforce, but to emphasise that at a national level, the Welsh Local Government Association, representing all 22 local authorities in Wales, along with the Association of Directors, is calling for the introduction of national terms and conditions for social workers, also for a national workforce plan as well, because what we can't do is address this problem alone. I haven't seen the Wales Online report, but I know from feedback from colleagues from right across Wales that the only difference is the degree to which recruitment and retention is a problem. It is a problem everywhere. And of course, we, as well as the long-term solution, which is about growing our own, it is about developing that next generation and retaining our existing workforce. Some of the immediate measures are around international recruitment, and again, we're working closely with our Health Board partners because they are very experienced at tapping into international workforce and enabling them to very smoothly transition into the Welsh workplace, because obviously there are differences for international workers, but that can be addressed through a very effective induction programme, and no doubt we will we'll return to this issue you'll want us to return to this issue as overt scrutiny process, and we'll be happy to continue to provide feedback on this and the workforce pressures across the local authority. And I'd finish on that point because sadly the pressures are not unique to social services, and again I would emphasise that some of these problems are national problems. They are as a result of years of pay freezes or real pay cuts across the public sector that makes it more difficult to recruit, and we will have to look at our whole pay and grading structure, but that is a mammoth task of work, and we'd have to look at how we finance that if we went down that road as well. So thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Leader, for that comprehensive response. We'll come to Councillor Heidi Bennett now, and then we really must conclude this item because we're well over time. Thank you, Councillor Bennett.
Thank Thank you, Chair. I'm referring to page 74, SSWB 38A, B and C, which is the reablement packages completed. Just noticing really that we've had a really good response in terms of mitigating need for support. And the notes comment that as a result of that, the other two targets, A and B, are looking like they're underperforming when in fact they're not. So my question is, it's a bit of a perverse KPI because it's a positive position rather than a red position, I'm understanding. So is there a need to reframe these targets going forward, Claire?
Councillor Bennett, succinctly, yes. They are national measures, so we'll continue to try to influence in that way, because every time we report on these targets, there's inevitably a need to explain the definitions and the fact that, you know, high performance in one area might look like then it's meaning poorer performance in another area. That the most important one is mitigating, because that means that there's no ongoing support needs, which is the ultimate success for any reablement programme. So yes, I would greatly welcome if the national indicators were changed to be more meaningful.
Thank you very much, Claire. Councillor Bennett, you happy with that?
Yes, happy and well done in terms of that performance area. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So if there are no further questions from members, I'd like to thank all of the invitees. And if you're not required for the next report, you may leave the meeting. Members, I'm going to call a 10-minute comfort break now, and we'll resume the meeting at 12:30. Thanks.